The closest comparison is probably, as a shooter, Kevin Durant. He's not the same type of player as Durant, but Jabari Smith is 6'10". He's long-armed, and he's a fabulous jump shooter. Hit 79 threes this year, shot 42% from three. He can make them off the catch, the dribble, fadeaways, turnaround jumpers. He's got a Dirk move, you name it. He can really shoot it, and he's an excellent defender that can guard multiple positions.
And how about the kid from Gonzaga, Chet Holmgren?
You know, there's nobody really like him, Greeny. He's truly unique, but I would say he's a little bit like Kristaps Porzingis with his ability to shoot the ball from the perimeter. He's a 40% three-point shooter, but he's also a baby Giannis with his ability to handle it in transition, to get downhill, and to finish around the basket. I mean, he's got game-changing ability. Chet Holmgren, if he reaches his potential, he's a big-time talent.
I like that. And then there's Jaden Ivey, who everyone around New York is talking about this week. How about him?
Incredible explosive speed, especially in the open court and in transition. He's got an amazing first step. He reminds me, with that speed and explosiveness, a little bit of Ja Morant, but he's got the length of a Dwayne Wade. He's got a long wingspan. He's tall. He can elevate. Pretty good out of pick and rolls. He's got to improve his reads there, and I think he can improve as a defender. But there's no doubt that he's a prototypical NBA wing with that explosiveness and shot creation.
So interesting thing happened overnight. The odds shifted on who was going to be the #1 pick in the draft. Jabari Smith was the favorite yesterday. Now suddenly Paolo Banchero is. Quickly, Jay, if you had to bet on one player in this draft to elevate a franchise, who would it be?
Well, I think the top four, we mentioned Jaden Ivey, I would throw in there along with Holmgren, Smith, and Banchero. I think those are the game changers. But if Holmgren reaches his potential, he has the highest ceiling and the most potential for greatness in the modern NBA. And I don't make that baby Giannis comparison lightly. I think we can see even more from Holmgren. He's a magnificent ball handler. He can pass it. He's a big-time shot blocker. The only thing that gives you any pause in sort of my old school Neanderthal basketball brain is his body doesn't look like an NBA body of old. But I don't think that matters anymore. He is tough and competitive. And anytime he hits the deck, he gets right back up. He's never had any injury problems. I like Smith as the #1 pick, but this is a year where there's not necessarily a wrong answer at #1, and you could make a good case for any of Holmgren, Smith, or Banchero. I just lean towards Smith because of his tremendous shooting ability and defensive versatility in the NBA.
Strangely, I've just been told that now Caesars has taken the odds for the #1 pick off the board for tonight. So anything could happen, and Jay Billis will be right there in the middle of all the action. Thank you, Jay. As always, again, the draft is tonight. Barclays in Brooklyn. The Magic have the first pick. OKC and Houston are next. It's 8 Eastern. You'll see it on ABC, ESPN. You'll hear it on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Coverage starts 7:30 Eastern time. All right, coming up, Windy is coming back. Tell you the one thing Kyrie could do this summer that would send the Nets into a complete panic. And I, for one, am hoping he does. That's next. Get up on ESPN. For that man, Kyrie Irving has until June 29th, that's next Wednesday, to decide whether or not he will opt out of the final year of his contract with the Nets and become a free agent. His running mate, Kevin Durant, is under contract through 2026. That pair has been inextricably linked since forming their partnership in 2019 through the very few ups and the very many downs that they've had all along that time. And Chris Canty with great perspective on this all morning long. But here's our NBA brain trust, Windy and Woj, with us here. Woj, I'll start with you. You had the big story yesterday about the latest on Kyrie, the relationship with KD, the significance of that from a leverage standpoint. For those who've not yet had a chance to see it, take us through where we stand.
Well, Greeny, the Nets are really trying to kind of ride two rails here. One, trying to stay disciplined from a contractual standpoint with Kyrie Irving moving forward on a new deal. They want a short deal. I think they would like to have some protections in there, perhaps around things such as games played that would, put the onus on Kyrie Irving to be on the court, something that he hasn't been enough for Brooklyn the last couple years. Of course, he wants a long-term max deal. That's not available to him in Brooklyn or anywhere else in the league right now. But by the same token, Brooklyn also needs to be, very aware, and they are, about Kevin Durant and the possibility that if Kyrie Irving walked and decided to take far less money to go somewhere else to play next season, that may impact how Kevin Durant feels about being in Brooklyn. But as you said, Greeny, he's signed through 2026. And listen, they need to find a way here to get a deal done with Kyrie Irving, keep Kevin Durant committed, and then try to shore up the rest of their roster. They need Patty Mills to opt in to his deal. But there's no question, listen, Brooklyn on some level is clearly willing to let Kyrie Irving walk, because right now they're not giving him everything he would like in negotiations. But it would be fairly unprecedented for a player of his stature to walk away from this much money. It's a negotiation, it's a dance, and you can expect it's going to play into next week.
Let's be clear about just what we're talking about here, Wendy. I mean, and you said in our first hour, he's an unpredictable person. And normally you would never expect anyone to walk away from the amount of money we're talking about here with Kyrie. You just kind of never know. But put in perspective for the fans here, what are we talking about in terms of money that he might be walking away from?
Yeah, so if he picks up his player option by next week, he's guaranteed $36 million for next year. And if he does that, it almost certainly means he's going to be a Brooklyn Net. If everything was in a good position and everything was good with the Nets and they were ready to sign him to a long-term deal, he would opt out of that contract. He would sign a brand new contract starting at his actual max, which is $42 million. That right now does not seem to be an option for the Nets. So when it comes to leveraging his position, he really needs to convince the Nets that he has another option. And in the last 6 or 7 days, because some teams learned of this situation about a week ago, I have not been able to identify any teams that are making significant moves to clear cap space or to prepare a trade offer for the Nets. Now, the draft is tonight. We could see things change after the way the teams play out. But the classic team we're looking at here is the Brooklyn Nets, or the New York Knicks. They're the team that needs a point guard that has assets that could make a trade. And they are on the hunt for a point guard. And they are looking to do things. But that point guard is not Kyrie Irving right now. They're looking at possibly trading up in this draft to get Jaden Ivey out of Purdue, or to clear cap space to chase Jalen Brunson in free agency next week. If Kyrie Irving's on their priority list, he's not at the top. And so that even, makes it harder to project what the Nets are going to have to do here and what leverage might actually force them to move.
Fascinating. There's the traditional leverage, which is does someone else want him? And then as Woj is sort of the thrust of the story from yesterday, KD presents sort of his own individual leverage. And Chris Canty, I would love to get your perspective on that side of this, the KD of it all. You host the national talk show. You're based here in New York. You understand the dynamics of the situation as well as anybody. How about, if you're Kevin Durant right now, what are you thinking as all this is going?
Well, if you're Kevin Durant, you're thinking, I've backed Kyrie at every turn since we arrived in Brooklyn in the last 3 years. You're talking about a player in Kai that's missed over 120 games, a guy that decided that he wasn't going to get vaccinated when all the other Nets players did. Even when it knew it could potentially cost you James Harden, he still didn't, and Kevin Durant supported him. Now, I was under the assumption, Greeny, a couple of months ago when Sean Marks issued the ultimatum, that Kevin Durant supported the organization taking that stance with Kyrie. But depending on what ends up happening over the course of the next week, we're going to get more insight as to how Kevin Durant feels about what the Brooklyn Nets have laid out for Kyrie Irving the last several weeks. So that's the part that becomes the most fascinating to me. But if KD and Kyrie can't find a way to make it work in Brooklyn, to me, that is an admission of failure on Kevin Durant's part in terms of trying to build a championship contender, knowing that he left a better basketball situation in Golden State to start something with one of his good friends, Kyrie Irving.
Look at that number on the screen. Since they've been together 3 years, they've played 58 games. I mean, when you just look at it that way, you sort of know it in your head. But when you look at it, it is just an astonishing number over the course of 3 seasons. In fairness, that first year, Durant didn't play at all. He was coming back from an Achilles. But even so, Woj, put a finishing touch on this here for us. What should the fans be thinking about as we look ahead to whatever might happen tonight and then, most importantly, next Wednesday?
Well, listen, Greeny, I think certainly from the Brooklyn perspective, knowing where they stand with Kevin Durant is going to be a big part of the leverage that they hold over Kyrie Irving. And listen, remember last season, he lost about $17 million because of his decision to not get vaccinated, his losing a significant shoe deal that I think in part has been because of his inavailability around the Nets the last 2 years. And so I think for Brooklyn, listen, they want to keep Kevin Durant committed, focused on being a part of this team. You talk to other agents and players around the league in other seasons, Kevin Durant was out this time of year, helping to talk to potential free agents. They'll tell you he hasn't done that so far this year. And so I think for the Nets, I think there's a deal to be made here with Kyrie Irving. I think ultimately you take him at his word that he's wanted to stay here. Nobody wants to give up that much money. I think there's a way for them to get to it in the next week and bring this group back next season.
This thing gets interestinger and interestinger as we go. Awesome work. Woj, story yesterday. Fascinating if you haven't seen it. All right, meantime.